So let me show you what I did here. I looked at our most recent national tests. These are the national tests in the U.S. that are taken by a sample of kids just like TIMSS and PISA on the international level. And I've disaggregated them for low-income kids. These are black kids who are brought up in poverty. That's as challenged a subgroup as we have. And what do you see here? You see basically that Boston, 230 points versus Detroit, 33 points. That's a 3-year gap in the 4th grade for the same low-income black children. What's that about? It's not about poverty. It's not about challenges. All of these kids face challenges. It's about the power of education at the systems level. If you disaggregated it at the schools level, you would see a lot more. I showed a slide to everyone when they tell me it's all about poverty and challenge. If America did nothing else but bring the poor African-American kids in Detroit up to Boston, it would be a major miracle. And there's no reason we can't do it, because those kids in Boston face the exact same kind of challenges. Now, so why, after 30 years of a nation at risk, are we where we are? And that's because I believe we don't want to talk about the really important things because it makes us uncomfortable. And I'm convinced that this slide and the next one that I show you are really the two most important I can show you. The elephant in the room has been teacher effectiveness, and we have got to talk about it. Different teachers with the same kids are getting different results. I can show you this in 1,000 different ways. In a recent study by McKinsey that studied all of the systems, those that are doing well on PISA and TIMSS, places like Korea and Finland and Singapore, Denmark and others, and those who aren't doing well, places like the US and the UK. And what did they conclude? The quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers. The top performing school systems internationally attract more able people into the profession, leading to better outcomes. The systems we've studied, the top performing systems, recruit from the top third of each cohort that graduate from this school system. Conversely, low-performing school systems rarely attract the right people into teaching. The new commission, a commission I served on in the U.S., observes that in America we recruit our teachers from the bottom third of our high school students going to college. So right there, we have got to focus on how we address that issue, because it's an enormous disparity, and the opening line to me is so powerful. The quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers. Now, what makes that more troubling is not only are we attracting the wrong people, but if you look at the second point, research shows us that teacher quality is unevenly distributed in schools, and the students with the greatest needs tend to have access to the least qualified and least effective teachers. So as a group, we're not bringing in the right people, and then we're discriminating against the neediest kids. So the kids with the greatest challenges disproportionately getting young and oftentimes unqualified people teaching them. That is the heart of the challenge. And in everything that I'm going to talk about from now on, I'm going to tell you how in New York we tried to address that both directly and indirectly. Because if we don't improve the effectiveness of the instruction that's being provided to our children, whether we do that through professional development, attracting different people, using technology intelligently, if we don't change that, then we're going to have another 30 years like we had after Nation at Risk. We can sure spend more money. The question is, can we get better outcomes? What's the beginning of the way to change it? The beginning of the way to change it, the backbone of the solution, something that I think your mayor is going to do a lot to change, is to talk about accountability and to talk about it honestly. So one of the things that struck me coming from the private sector, I was at the German media company Bertelsmann when I took this job, is how little accountability there is in the public sector. And part of it is what Dove talked about. We change people, administrations, et cetera, et cetera. But if we don't have accountability so that we can measure success, we're not going to get there. The first quote is from Al Shanker. Many of you may know Al Shanker. He was the iconic American labor leader, the most powerful head of the teachers union the United States has ever seen. And in a moment of candor, one I think some of his friends wish he hadn't indulged, he points out that the key is that unless there is accountability, we'll never get the right system. As long as there are no consequences, if kids or adults don't perform. Let me read that again. As long as there are no consequences if kids or adults don't perform, as long as the discussion is not about education and student outcomes, then we're playing a game as to who has the power. That's what it's been for far too long in the United States. Unless you talk about outcomes, changing results, number of kids who exit public education ready for career or college, then it's about power. And unless you start with a heavy emphasis on accountability, you're not going to get the system with the other pieces falling into place. Now, if you take that quote and the second one here is from Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, and he wrote it about a second book about the social sectors. And this is what happens in education. Everybody says, sure, we're for accountability, just not that kind of accountability or this kind of, don't measure the test, this is not the right thing. And so we forever argue about accountability rather than arguing about changing the outcomes for students. And what Jim Collins says, to throw up our hands and say, but we cannot measure performance in social sectors the way we do in business, is simply a lack of discipline. All indicators are flawed, whether qualitative or quantitative. Test scores are flawed, mammograms are flawed, crime data are flawed, et cetera, et cetera. He concludes, what matters is not finding the perfect indicator, but settling upon a consistent and intelligent method, assessing your output results, and then tracking your trajectory with rigor. An intelligent method of assessing your output results, student outcomes, and then tracking your trajectory with rigor. That is the backbone and, truthfully, the controversial dimensions of what we do in New York City.